The Galactic Council chamber was a place of diplomacy, of measured words and careful treaties. For centuries, it had been the beating heart of galactic peace, a shining beacon of civilization's triumph over war. The concept of full-scale conflict had been considered an outdated relic, a thing of primitive species that had yet to evolve past their baser instincts. And then humanity arrived. The first transmission came in the form of an ultimatum. We know what you did. You have one cycle to respond. The words were blunt, without the flowery language the council was accustomed to. They carried a weight that unsettled the seasoned diplomats, a sense of finality that no one quite understood. Chancellor Zervex, the Ytheri delegate and one of the council's longest-serving members, flicked his 4 eyes across the chamber, waiting for someone to speak. "Surely this is a misunderstanding," he said at last, his voice carrying the oily smoothness of a politician accustomed to negotiation. "The humans are new to the galactic stage. Perhaps they misinterpret." A secondary transmission interrupted him. This time it came with visual data. The chamber fell into stunned silence as holographic images projected into the air. Massive fields of lifeless bodies, entire colonies burned to ash. Floating husks of ships shattered beyond repair. The timestamp on the footage was old, decades old. But the perpetrators were unmistakable. The insignia of the Galactic Council's own peacekeeping fleets was stamped onto the wreckage. And in the center of it all, a ruined world, its surface scarred with craters where cities once stood. Terra. Chancellor Zervex's breath hitched. "No, that's impossible." The council chamber erupted into frantic murmurs. This couldn't be real. It had to be a fabrication, a trick. A new voice cut through the chaos, deep and unyielding. "Your time is up." The transmission ended. Silence reigned. Then, from the far edges of council space, reports began to flood in. Human war fleets, emerging from the darkness like wraiths. Their ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, monolithic, bristling with unknown weaponry, and moving with a coordination that suggested they had been preparing for this moment for years. One by one outposts went dark. The border worlds, defended by fleets that had never known real war, fell in days. The humans did not speak again. They did not negotiate. They only advanced. Panic gripped the council. Military leaders scrambled to assemble defenses, but they were woefully unprepared. Humanity was not just retaliating. They were executing a war of annihilation. "They should not be capable of this," Councillor Vornik hissed, his mandibles clicking in distress. "We wiped them out." He stopped abruptly, horror dawning on his face. The realization spread through the chamber like wildfire. The attack on Terra had not finished them. It had forged them. Somewhere, in the ruins of their homeworld, humanity had rebuilt. In the shadows they had prepared. And now they had returned. The council had seen wars before. Skirmishes between unruly factions, disputes over resources. But this was something else. This was an extinction-level response, a fury so all-consuming that it eclipsed all previous conflicts. A new report arrived. The capital of the Ytheri homeworld was under siege. The sky, once filled with the soft glow of orbital stations, was now ablaze. Council fleets desperately attempted to hold the line, but the human warships carved through them like predators tearing through helpless prey. A single human transmission was intercepted during the battle. "We remember." The council had always believed themselves untouchable, above the crude violence of lesser species. But as humanity's war engines thundered ever closer, tearing through their defenses with the precision of a species that had nothing left to lose, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The Galactic Council had made a mistake. And humanity had come to collect the debt. The Galactic Council's war room was in chaos. Shouting filled the chamber as panicked diplomats and generals scrambled to make sense of the catastrophe unfolding across their territories. Star systems that had stood unchallenged for centuries were falling in mere days. The human fleet was advancing with terrifying efficiency, cutting through defenses as if they were mere suggestions. Chancellor Zervex struggled to maintain composure as new reports flashed across the central holodisplay. The Ytheri homeworld, a seat of cultural and political influence, had gone silent. The last transmission had been a desperate plea for reinforcements, then static. Zervex turned to High Commander Vecker, the Thalvikian military strategist who had orchestrated countless campaigns. "You have to tell me you have something," Zervex hissed, his usually smooth voice cracking. Vecker's hardened exoskeleton plates shifted uneasily. "We underestimated them." Zervex's eyes narrowed. "We killed them. You should not have." The voice was deep, mechanical, one of the Council's AI war advisors. The machine intelligence had been designed to process countless war scenarios, but now it sounded almost defeated. They do not fight like other species, the AI continued. They do not seek surrender. They do not seek dominance. They seek revenge. The word hung heavy in the air. Across the chamber, Counselor Vornick's mandibles twitched in horror. Then we must. A violent tremor rocked the station. Alarms blared as the hollow displays flickered. Emergency protocols activated, sealing the chamber in defensive shields. Zervex felt the icy grip of fear claw at his chest. What was that? A technician's voice cracked through the noise. Enemy fleet detected, they're here. Silence fell. Then the station's main screen flared to life, displaying the impossible. A human fleet. Not at the edge of the system. Not days away. They were already in orbit. Hundreds of warships hung in the void, an armada unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. No heralds. No demands. No pretense of diplomacy. They had arrived. Impossible, Vecker whispered, his war-hardened mind refusing to comprehend the sheer scope of the force assembled before them. How did they? Then the first human weapons fired. Energy lances cut through the void, piercing through orbital defenses like they were paper. The Council's fleet, rushed, uncoordinated, unprepared, scrambled to intercept, but the humans were merciless. Their ships moved in perfect synchronicity, hammering through defensive lines with cold, methodical precision. The battle was not a battle. It was an execution. Within minutes, station defenses buckled. Explosions rocked the structure as alarms blared across every deck. A desperate voice screamed over the intercom, "They've breached the..." Then silence. Zervex could barely process what was happening. It wasn't just a war. It was a reckoning. And then, for the first time since the war began, a human transmission cut through the chaos. The chamber's speakers crackled to life. A single voice. "Come. Steady. Unyielding. Do you remember us now?" The station shuddered again, the ceiling lights flickering as another wave of impacts rippled through the structure. Zervex's breath came in short gasps. He had spent his entire career negotiating, orchestrating treaties that bound the galaxy in peace. Now, in mere days, all of it had unraveled. "We have to surrender," Vornick choked out, his previous bravado gone. "We have to beg. They are not here for surrender." Vecker's voice was hollow. The main holoscreen changed. Live footage from the station's exterior cameras displayed the battlefield. The Council fleet was in ruins. Shattered ships drifted in the void. Escape pods that had ejected too soon were being systematically destroyed. The humans were leaving no survivors. Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. Then, something worse than the weapons fire filled the chamber. The sound of metal tearing. The humans were boarding. Zervex's throat tightened. This was not how the Council was supposed to fall. This was not how civilization was supposed to end. The doors to the chamber shuddered. Council guards, armed with weapons meant for ceremonial deterrence rather than true combat, scrambled into defensive positions. A voice, guttural and raw, echoed from the other side of the blast doors. "For Terra." Then the doors exploded inward. Smoke and fire filled the Galactic Council's war chamber as the blast doors crumpled inward, torn apart by a controlled explosion. The shockwave sent diplomats and military leaders sprawling, the acrid scent of burning metal stinging their senses. Through the haze, the first human soldiers stepped in. They moved with terrifying precision, armored figures clad in sleek, angular battle suits, their visors gleaming with the cold efficiency of executioners. Their rifles were already raised, scanning the chamber with lethal intent. A single step forward. Then another. No hesitation. No wasted movement. This was not the march of conquerors. This was a reckoning. Chancellor Zervex scrambled backward, his multiple limbs trembling. This couldn't be happening. The Council had won against humanity long ago. Their homeworld had been turned to ash, their fleets wiped out. They were supposed to be extinct. And yet here they were. A single human soldier strode into the chamber, taller than the rest. His helmet retracted with a smooth hiss, revealing a scarred face. His expression carved from stone, his gaze colder than the void itself. He didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. The weight of his presence said everything. Then finally the words came. "You don't deserve a trial." The Council guards made their choice first. They raised their weapons in a desperate attempt at defiance, firing wildly. It was a mistake. The humans moved as one, faster than anything the Council had ever seen. A barrage of return fire cut through the guards in seconds, precision shots finding their marks with clinical efficiency. The Council's so-called elite protection force crumpled to the ground, their weapons clattering uselessly beside them. Silence followed. No more resistance. Only death. Zervex clutched his chest, his breath ragged. We can negotiate. The lead soldier turned to him, eyes devoid of emotion. You had your chance. Zervex's mind raced. There had to be something, anything. A different council member, Councillor Vornik, dropped to his knees, mandibles clicking in desperation. Please? We didn't know. We were told humanity was a threat. The human's expression didn't change. You knew. Vornik trembled. A single shot rang out. Vornik's body slumped to the floor, a smoking hole burned through his skull. The rest of the council flinched, horrified. The lead soldier exhaled slowly as if grounding himself. Then he gestured to his troops. Secure the chamber. More human warriors flooded in, their boots thudding against the ornate floor. Some moved to the war tables, accessing data consoles with practiced ease. Others stepped behind the remaining council members, weapons raised. Zervex knew what was coming next. You're making a mistake, he rasped. The human soldier turned back to him. No. You made the mistake. Then he lifted his weapon. Zervex closed his eyes, bracing for the end. But the shot never came. Instead, a new voice crackled through the human comms. Enemy reinforcements inbound. The lead soldier's head snapped toward his HUD display. His jaw tightened. Zervex's eyes flickered open. Reinforcements? The council still had forces left? Then the station lurched. A deep, resonant boom shook the structure as something massive entered real space. The chamber's main holo display flickered, showing a sight that made Zervex's breath catch. A war fleet. Dozens of ships, larger than anything the council had ever deployed before. Their hulls shimmered with experimental shielding, weapon systems flaring to life. Not council ships. Unknown. Even the human soldiers hesitated for a brief moment. Then, a transmission cut through the static, broadcasting across every open channel. Attention all forces. This war is over. Humanity's vengeance ends here. Zervex's blood ran cold. That voice was human. But not from the fleet that had attacked them. The lead human soldier's expression darkened. Impossible. The holo display zoomed in, locking onto the insignia emblazoned on the lead warship. It was human. But different. A separate faction. And they had just arrived to stop the war. For the first time since the war began, the battlefield fell into a tense, deafening silence. Both fleets, the vengeful human armada and the newly arrived force, hung in space, weapons charged but not yet firing. The air in the council war chamber was thick with confusion, tension thrumming like a live wire. Chancellor Zervex, still trembling, could barely process what he was seeing. Another human fleet. Not allies. Not reinforcements. A separate force, powerful enough to challenge the one that had torn through the council's defenses like they were nothing. The lead human soldier's expression had darkened into something unreadable, his jaw set like iron. His comms flickered, his troops receiving silent orders through their visors. They adjusted their stances, subtly shifting into a defensive formation. Then the transmission cut through once more. To all Terran forces, stand down. The voice was calm, measured, but carried an authority that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. Zervex saw the brief flicker of hesitation in the soldier's eyes before it was buried beneath hardened resolve. He tapped his wrist console. Identify. His HUD blinked in response, scanning the new fleet's transmission codes. What appeared on his display made him stiffen. A single name. Admiral Elias Rains. The air itself seemed to tighten around them. The lead soldier took a slow step forward, his voice low, almost a whisper. Rains is dead. The response came immediately. Not yet. A shudder rippled through the soldiers. Zervex saw it, felt it. This name meant something to them. And then, as if to confirm the impossible, the holo display flickered once more, this time revealing a face. A human man, older, his features lined with age and war, but his eyes still sharp. His uniform was different from the soldiers in the chamber, adorned with unfamiliar insignia. Zervex's mind reeled. This was another faction of humanity? Rains met the lead soldier's gaze through the screen. You weren't supposed to come back like this. The soldier's fists clenched. And you weren't supposed to abandon us. A beat of silence. Then Rains exhaled. Stand down, Captain. The soldier's jaw tightened. You know I can't do that. Zervex could barely breathe. The room was on the edge of an explosion. One wrong move, and the war that had already shattered the council could spiral into something even worse. Rains leaned forward, his voice unwavering. "This isn't vengeance anymore, Captain. This is extermination." The soldier didn't flinch. "It's justice." "Justice?" Rain's eyes darkened. "Tell me, how many civilians have you killed?" The soldier's expression didn't change, but the chamber felt heavier. Rains pressed on. "How many children burned when you glassed their worlds?" Zervex flinched at the words, but the soldier didn't so much as blink. Then finally he spoke. "Not nearly as many as we lost." A silence stretched between them. Rains sighed. "We're not them anymore, Captain. The ones who did this to us? They're dead. We made sure of it. But now we're the monsters. And if you keep going," he paused, his voice steady, firm, "you'll be no different from the council that tried to erase us." The soldier's fingers twitched near his weapon. A single movement, a breath away from war. Zervex held perfectly still. He wasn't sure what terrified him more, that these two human factions would destroy each other, or that they wouldn't. Then, a long, slow exhale. The soldier finally lowered his weapon. A ripple of movement followed as his troops followed suit. Rains nodded once. "It's over." The soldier's gaze lingered for a moment longer. Then finally he tapped his wrist console. "All units, disengage." The hollow display shifted, showing the once relentless human fleet powering down weapons, pulling back. The war was ending. But as Zervex looked at the humans, both in the chamber and on the screen, he realized something. The Galactic Council had feared them as a threat. They had tried to erase them, and they had failed. Now humanity stood before them, not as the broken remnants of a forgotten species, but as something far more terrifying. A force that could shatter empires, and one that had no masters. As Rain's fleet pulled into formation, preparing to depart, Zervex finally found his voice. "What happens now?" Rain's gaze met his through the hollow screen. "We rebuild." Pause. Then his eyes darkened. "But we never forget." And with that, humanity's fleets vanished into the void, leaving the galaxy forever changed. The end.